Hello and welcome back to Let's Chill, the official, unofficial Minnesota Wind Chill, Minnesota Strike podcast. I'm Jeff,
I'm Jay.
And I'm Kane.
and we're back with yet another weekend recap of a Minnesota Wind Chill game. This one, of course, the Wind Chill went to Colorado to play the Summit, their first ever matchup. And I think before the game occurred, like it was really like it could have been anyone's game. I think everyone was like, because these teams never played before, like I'm totally getting ahead of myself here. But what I'm gonna say before we get to Sol 7 is it felt like a coin flip. It ended up not being a coin flip. We've got a lot to talk about on this podcast. Before I get ahead of myself anymore, should we hit some Stall 7s?
Good idea.
All right. All right. I'm gonna bring you to a Stall 7 about the strike. What strike player got married this weekend? I believe it was this weekend. I'll admit maybe it was last weekend. What strike player recently got married? What?
Jane Cook.
Nope.
I was gonna say like Naraya.
Huh?
Naraya Bill Sims.
Yeah, it was Naraya.
Woo! That was
Yeah,
a
for
random
real.
guess.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Congrats, Naraya.
You want you on the pod? Get her on the
We
pod?
should, yeah, absolutely.
She get
Yeah.
on the pod. All right, bet.
Um,
Okay. I got a stall. I got a stall 7. How many teams are there in the AUDL? Give
What?
me a number.
I
How
hate
many
that I
teams?
don't actually know this number. I think
Yeah,
it's
give me
24.
a number. 24, Jeff?
I was gonna say 25.
It's 24.
Okay. All right.
I look at the power rankings every week, and I just see Detroit 24 every week.
Yeah, true.
Also, when they do it like game of the week, the top 12, bottom 12.
Yeah. Oh, we got to talk
We
about
should
Detroit
we should
too.
do Detroit check-in at some point on this pod.
Before we get to
Yeah.
Minnesota, we will. But yeah.
I have a stall 7 as well, though. How many games does Minnesota need to win of their last 4 to guarantee a spot in the postseason?
I know the answer. I know for sure the answer. Jeff, do you want to guess?
I think it's 2.
It's 2.
It's 2.
Nice.
Yeah.
And that's doable.
And that's only if Pittsburgh wins their next 5 games.
Wins or
If
loses?
Pittsburgh if Pittsburgh wins their next 5 games, Minnesota needs to win 2. But if Pittsburgh loses 2 games, we're in the postseason.
Okay.
Even if we lose the next 5.
Next 4, but yeah, we have 4 left.
Yeah.
You see, I'm glad that I have
Because
a
we'll
brother
have-
who I can just point to and be like, hey, what happens if this team loses this many games? Well, this will be the outcome of that. It's like, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah,
that.
Jay runs the numbers. He's like, let me just punch
Yeah,
the numbers really fast.
There's the stat guy. We just watch the games.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, because we have those 2 head-to-head wins against Madison, it doesn't matter if we beat Madison anymore. Even if Madison somehow comes back and wins their next 5 games, they'll be 6-6. And
Are they officially eliminated? Does that mean?
No. Wait.
But then Indy would have to lose all of their games.
Chicago has to lose all their games, and Madison has to win all of their games.
And then we have to win all of our games as well. Because we can't get knocked out of first. Because then that would knock
I'm just saying,
them
just for
out.
Madison to get eliminated.
Oh no, it's if Madison wins all of their games and Chicago loses all of their games,
Then they
Pittsburgh loses 1. It's Indy, Minnesota, Madison.
Okay. So what about Detroit then? How is Detroit doing?
Yes,
That's
the
the
Detroit
problem.
check-in.
It is theoretically possible for Detroit to not finish in last place. Because I'm pretty sure Madison and Detroit have 1 more head-to-head.
But what was how are they doing recently, Jay? They're doing pretty nice.
Oh yeah, they're doing very nice recently. I didn't even
Detroit,
think about that.
Detroit Mechanics with 69 straight losses.
As of recording this podcast, this is as of what, 6:25.
Yeah.
I have a theory, especially after they played in Indy last week. They're gonna win their game this coming weekend against Madison, right?
Yeah, I think it's against Pittsburgh.
It's Pittsburgh this weekend, and I can definitely see them beating Pittsburgh.
Nice.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if they set the record for a losing streak at 69? What a legend move that would be. They have to win. This weekend, everyone is a Mechanics fan.
I agree. I think they're playing at home, but I guess I don't know off the top of my head. But And not
Yeah,
not for Detroit. No offense to Detroit. Not that a home field advantage is going to make that big of a difference, especially considering they brought Indy to 1 point in Indy. But
Right.
if home
Right.
field advantage makes a difference, I think they have it.
they do not. They're
They do
playing
not.
they're playing at Pittsburgh.
Good thing
Gotcha.
home field advantage doesn't make a difference for them.
That's
For them,
right.
yeah, for them.
Although, again, if we're talking about beating the streak, like you want to do that in front of your home fans. Like,
True. That's true.
Yes, but also think about how demoralizing for Pittsburgh fans it would be. So it's almost like you want to do it in front of somebody else's fans for the team as well.
this is true. This is
It
true.
should be
That would
like,
be pretty
screw
funny.
you guys. Here's all that smack talk over the last few years. It's like
Yeah.
deserved, but also shut up.
Um,
No, I like Detroit.
Do you want to get to the windshield game?
Yeah, let's actually talk about the podcast agenda.
So, if I'm assuming if anyone has not seen the final score of the Winchell at Summit game, the Summit just stomped on the Winchell 25-15. And honestly, they didn't even do it like it was not a
I
pretty
got
game.
buried under a mountain. We
Yeah,
got buried under a mountain.
yeah. It
write
was
that down. Write that down.
It's the article title.
it just wasn't a pretty game. Like, okay, just like initial reactions, thoughts, opinions on the game.
I'm sad, but also like I said this right before the pod. I'm still a fan of the team. Like I'm still like, oh, this loss sucks. But I'm not devastated. I'm like, okay, we lost. That made me upset. But now let's go, watch them play good frisbee again next week is all. So
Um, I'm not even saying this to like be rude to Minnesota, or Detroit, but Minnesota played worse than Detroit did. Like Detroit played bad on Saturday, and Minnesota literally played worse than Detroit on Saturday. So
Yeah, I think I'm really bummed out about this loss. I think we know it was kind of a free loss. Because it's not a divisional game, it still matters, but it's not like we gave up a loss to Indy, who then also got the win, something like that. Like it was a free loss in that sense, but it also would have been a free win. Like it was a big game in that sense. It's a big game in the sense that like interdivisional games are so rare that like this game we're probably most likely going to have to replicate it or something like it in the playoffs or in championship weekend, so like to have that big of a loss, and then if the Summit come to Minnesota and face the Winchell in the semis, like they know, hey, we could do this, we just stomped them, like let's do it again, we know we can. So that morale piece I think is big, but at the same time I'm not like I'm devastated, but I'm like positively devastated. I'm devastated in a positive way.
I think the way I'm looking at it is I'm not necessarily devastated that they lost overall. I'm more just like I'm upset that they lost this one. This would have been the game to win that really solidified that Minnesota can do this. But now I think all Minnesota has to do is just go win the rest of the season. Like they dropped this game. If they had won this game, then everyone would have been like, all right, Minnesota's top four. Minnesota's top four. But now we just got to battle it to get there. That's all it is. Like
I that's a really good take. I think that's true. Like I think if they would have had this free win, this is kind of what I mean is like they could afford to lose to Indy, for example, or to Madison or anyone. And it's kind of like, okay, that evens out. Like you're already because you won a game already that like doesn't really mean anything. So you can kind of lose another game. Now it's like every game now they play going forward is that much more important. And I think they can do it. I don't have any doubts about that, but it's just like a little bit more pressure now.
Yeah. I think my immediate thought when watching this game was just like it was messy. It looked really messy. I mean, the lines were weird. Minnesota's throws looked inconsistent. They looked like they were struggling to gauge the depth of the throws most of the time, not just because they were overthrowing them, not because of elevation. It just kind of looked like a lot of times they were throwing it and they were throwing it either 5 yards too shallow or 5 yards too deep. And it was just like, that's weird. Like, why are you like, you're just missing your receivers or the receivers weren't communicating well. So
Yeah, I agree. And I have never thrown a frisbee at 5,000 feet elevation, so I cannot speak to this. But like, I genuinely want to know how different it is, how that disc glides. And that's what everyone who has ever talked about AUDL in the past week, that's what they've talked about is Minnesota's going to be, slinging the disc in elevation, and it's going to be awesome to see. And even we were like, yeah, it's going to be freaking awesome. And then, right, like you said, Jay, like they just couldn't quite calibrate how much they should put on it, and it just could not find receivers. And I like to chalk that up to elevation, and I will to an extent, but I think to another extent, it's like they had to do something else, and it didn't. Nothing worked. It felt like.
Mhm. Yeah, it didn't feel like at any point the wind chill were fully locked in, if that makes sense. Like, because correct me if I'm wrong, but we didn't really have a lead that whole game.
No, I don't think we did at all.
Like,
No, we started with it was Colorado started with it and then Minnesota got broken right away, so it started 2-0.
okay. So it's like even just having that from the get-go really can just shut you down. For especially when all the pressure's on you and you go out there and you're like, all right, and then they just stomp you in the first quarter, it's hard to come back from that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be interested to see how we play in the first quarter versus the third or the fourth.
So that's the thing is like I feel like the first two quarters were rough, but I think at any point they were only down by like four, maybe five max. And like which is like that's not great, but okay, that's reasonable. You can do it.
Right. For the
But then
first
the
half, that's
third, yeah. The third quarter came around and I don't have the stats up right now, but like it was like first quarter was like 4-6 or something like that. And then like or like 3-6, 4-6. So it was like pretty consistent. And then the third quarter was like 3-8 or 3-9 or something. Like they really gave up a lot of points in the third quarter and just let that's when it went to crap. I think if the third quarter would have been different, if they would have won the third quarter, they could have won the game or again made it a lot closer to the game. Like
right.
to
Not a
I
10-point deficit.
exactly. And again, I don't think this game in retrospect, I don't think they would win this game if it were played at a neutral location or even at like home field. Like I just don't know. But I think that if it weren't for their own mistakes like that, like in the third quarter, they would have lost much closer. It would have been a much more competitive game. But it
I
just
agree.
kind of felt like they were like, nah, here you go. And the other thing too is like Colorado, you gotta put that in perspective. Like they had a 3 game losing streak going. They had way more motivation to win than Minnesota did. Like I'm not saying Minnesota had no reason to win. I think Jay might be disagreeing with me. I can't tell. But I think Colorado needed to win this game. If not for stats or standings, morale, and just to like solidify their strength. Minnesota, like again, not saying that kind of Colorado with no motivation, but like it wasn't as meaningful. Jay?
I do think Minnesota maybe I think you're right. I think Colorado had a bigger chip on their shoulder that they needed to win this game more so than Minnesota did. I even wrote about it in my in the preview article. Um, Colorado did break that streak, so that is big for them. But Minnesota, again, going into this, like, were the underdogs, and I think, I mean, other than what a few people are saying, like everyone was going to say, like, yeah, Minnesota's going to get blown out, and I think part of that was because they expected Minnesota to be bad, but not because Minnesota wouldn't want to play well. And I think Minnesota had a lot of motivation, like going into the game, like trying to prove people wrong. Like Abe Coffin was back for the first time in a month. He had missed 5 games or something like that. And I think he came in wanting to do well. I mean, we've talked to a lot of the guys on the team, and they always say like they're hungry. They want to win every game. Their mindset is just win. Get this, do this. So to see them just like be so disheartened, especially being down 5 at half is a big like oof. But like they came back and it just looked like they didn't change anything. They didn't look like they didn't talk about anything during the halftime. So I don't know if I would say that they weren't as motivated as Colorado, but there was definitely something happening with the team.
Definitely wish I was in those huddles. I'd love to know what was said in those huddles.
Yeah. even just to like, because even after the game, you can say, "Oh, this was like the game plan," but in the moment, you gotta wonder like when you're down by however many points you are at halftime, and like what do you even say to your team at that point? So,
Yeah.
I mean, props to the wind chill for sticking it out. It's I don't think any of the players ever gave up though. And I was talking to Cam Lacey today about that, and he said that yeah, they were all down on themselves. It was really hard to come back from that, and he admitted that like yeah, they did not fight back as hard as they needed to. Obviously, and like they lost, yeah, obviously. But he also said that like the team didn't let that put them down. He seemed very positive about it. He seemed very much like now they know kind of reflection on it rather than okay, we're gonna let Colorado stomp on us and we're just gonna let it happen. It was if this is gonna happen, what can we take away from it? What can we learn right now? And how can we make this team better? So I'm at the very least I'm positive about this outcome. I think it was a really good way for the wind chill to learn a lot quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think complacency is like the worst thing you could have right now. And this game, losing this game, gives you the exact opposite of complacency. It's like, oh shoot, okay, we're not necessarily those guys. We're not those guys yet. We can't just go to Colorado and take a win like that. It's like, all right, that's a good like humility check. We're gonna go back to Madison next week. We're gonna stomp them. Then we're gonna come home to Seafoam, and we're gonna stomp the Alley Cats. Like yeah, because I feel like if you win against Colorado, you kind of would have that like chip, like yeah, we're those guys. We did
Right.
this.
We're
Andy, you
top four in the
couldn't do
power
that.
ranking. Like,
Yeah, yeah. So, and maybe we're just like being positive for positivity's sake, but that's not a bad thing, right? Like,
yeah. And I don't think it is either. I don't think it's just for positivity's sake, because I mean, you saw us go to Chicago and lose to Chicago, right?
yeah,
It was the same mindset after that. It was okay. Last year, this Chicago team would have beat us again.
yep,
Like, but that's not the Winchell team this year.
yep.
Like the Winchell team is going to take that loss. It's going to look at where it failed as a team and adapt to meet that to beat that. So it's another thing that Lacey had told me was he wasn't actually ready for Colorado's system. He said that when Colorado had a break chance, uh, or sorry, when Colorado turned the disc over and Minnesota had a break chance, he said Colorado's defense was way stronger than they were anticipating. And so I think just having that out of division experience will just give the wind chill players much more perspective on like, okay, here's what we need to change to be up there with those guys now. So yeah, I don't think it is positivity for positivity's sake. I think we got a good staff that's gonna take this loss and use it.
So let's talk about Colorado's defense because that was a major part of this game. Both defenses. I think this was a defensive heavy game for as high of a scoring game as it was. I think, and I'm gonna say it and talk about all the time. I think this is a perfect example of how defense wins games, offense loses games. I think we've kind of started to circle around that idea, and like PK has said that, and we've kind of brought that up. Like I think Minnesota's offense lost them the game, while the Summit's defense won them the game. I think so Minnesota's offensive conversion rate, what was it here? I've got the stats. 36%. It's the second lowest conversion rate they've had this season. The lowest was 33% against the Union, right? And that's when they lost. They had 25 turnovers this season or this game, the most this season. So the offense clearly was not putting the disc in receivers' hands. We already talked about that. Like their long game was not working. They could not put the disc into the end zone, into someone's hands deep. But Colorado's defense also prevented, like, they clogged up those middle lanes. They clogged up that short game, which forced Minnesota to look deep. Normally, that's going to work. Minnesota is a huck heavy team, and I think we all know that. Whether it was the wind, whether it was the elevation, whether it was jitters, their long game, which is something they're strong on, lost them the game. And then conversely, the Summit's defense forced them to lose the game. Like so I think in this case, offense lost the game, defense won Summit's game.
Yeah, I can definitely get behind that their offense lost in this game. And I don't want to be too harsh on anyone, especially not Abe Coffin, who was just coming back for his first game. But I mean, their first offensive point really summed up how they played offense basically the whole game. It was, I don't even know if Klane, if there was even a reset pass. Klane was on the back line and hucked it to Coffin, and Coffin just didn't grab it. Like it just fell out of, like it was in his hand and then it wasn't. Like, and that's extraordinarily abnormal. Coffin catches that, then you have a 30 yards up the field, and one of the best players in the league is handling the disc. Like,
I thought that was for a goal. Even I thought that was in the end zone.
No, I don't. I think it was to clear the end zone.
Regardless of what it was, like, yeah, same situation. Like,
yeah. And I can't help but say, like, that was pretty much how their offense played the whole game.
Yeah.
Between dropped passes, there were fewer drop passes than there were turf throws, and there were a lot of turf throws. Just, I don't know if just wind caught at the bad time or if there was something going on with just the morale of the game, but there were a lot of turf throws.
It felt like, I mean, I said this earlier, like, yes, give Summit their credit. They were playing against the Summit, but it really felt like Minnesota just was their own worst enemy. They were fighting, again, elevation, windy conditions, a hostile road crowd that you've never been in, and then their own miscues, mental, like, blocks and just mental game.
Right.
And
All
so
the pressure having this game, everything like that. Like there were, I think, more factors that the team could have prepared for going into it. I think that's a fair assessment. I think it really was. You can't really point to one thing in this game. I feel like, or at least you have to acknowledge how many different parts there were going into this and how the team didn't need to be another factor to worry about, but it was, and it's.
Yeah, exactly. What about, like, did it surprise you guys to see Dylan DeClerc and Tanner Barkis play as much offense as they did? They each played, I think, 8 offensive points. And like generally they've played this season like 2 to 3 offensive points per game. And this game it was like just about half of their play time was on offense. Like what was that about? While also, let me give more context. Abe Coffin only played 1 defensive point. So he was also like, it wasn't like they were flexing everybody. It was like those 2 in particular were offensive heavy.
I think, and this was something that I thought watching the game, going to the game in the first place. Feldman had talked about getting a deeper look in his attack and looking better on their attack. And I think if DeClerc doesn't score 6 goals last weekend, he doesn't play on offense this weekend. And I think just that the difference in those lines might have thrown him off a little bit. But I do think that it was just this, hey, these players have been doing really well offensively when we get the disc. Let's put them on offense and see if they do really well on offense. And I personally think that was a mistake. I think that was a strategy mistake. One of the few like genuine mistakes that, like, for strategizing Minnesota made it. I mean, because Minnesota's defense is already shorthanded yesterday. And like we had the majority of our roster and it was majority full strength, but our defense was missing PK, Sam Berglund, Colin Berry. Like we were missing 3 of our star defensive players. And then to take our 2 block leaders and Tanner Barkis and Dylan DeClerc and put them on the offense, I can't say I'm surprised that Minnesota didn't generate a ton of breakpoints.
Right. I mean, honestly, I don't really understand that move. I know how I feel about it. I disagree with it. I think it was Dylan DeClerc to me is the Minnesota D line. And I think that's not to like discredit the rest of the players on the D line, but I mean, he just brings such an energy to it on every single point that I think he really adds like the defensive energy that you need on the D line. As I'm not saying never play him on offensive point, he has his value there for sure, but Yeah, that to me was not the right decision. But again, I don't know. I'm not down there game time, so maybe that was the only decision.
Yeah, it's just really interesting. Like I think this is when it gets to the pros and cons of the depth of a roster and the flexibility of a roster, where if you're too flexible, you're not going to have consistency and you're not going to have that identity that you need. Say, this is my role, and I know what I'm going to do when I go on the field. And like that's more than just like crossing over offense, defensive points and stuff, but like that's a pretty dramatic shift to put Dylan DeClerc on 8 offensive points and Tanner Barkas too. Yeah, like two of our block leaders. We know that I think that's where the team lost was or one way. Like they scored their first break point in the fourth quarter. They scored 2 break points. And like that's that's enough to win. Technically, like that is enough to win. I'm not even upset about that, but like it's just very indicative of how the game was played. And like Colorado scored their first break point, the first point of the game, if I'm not mistaken. So like Colorado's defense we know is very strong going into it. So I understand why you want to bolster your offense, but that's not the way to do it. I think
Yeah,
Um,
you can't bolster the offense at
while
risking
reducing.
the identity of the defense. Like,
although I will say, we were talking about this earlier, this was kind of a free loss that Minnesota had. Even like we know going into this game, Minnesota was 6-1. The Alley Cats had already won their game, so they were 6-2. So we know that if we lost, we were still tied in first with the Alley Cats, and because we have that head-to-head win against them, like we're still like in first place in the division. So I think at least on the very bright side, this might be a really big copium take, like this really big like ooh maybe, but I think doing all these things wrong almost like all these things, it really gave Minnesota that like, okay, got it out of our system. We had the free loss, might as well use it. You know what I mean? Like I wish
yeah,
they would have won, but like what Kane you guys were saying earlier, like complacency would have been bad. You don't want them to be like, oh yeah, we totally I mean like I would have loved if they stopped Colorado. Don't get me wrong, I would have loved if they 10-1 beat Colorado by 10 points. But I do think that losing by 10 points, trying out these new things, seeing these things didn't work. I think, Tanner Barkas has got 10 blocks. Dylan DeClerc's got 9. Don't think they're going to be playing much more on the O line. I think they're
Yeah.
probably going to be relegated to the D line for the rest of the year. And it was a good game to try them on the O line, and you had the loss, so you might as well use it. Kind of.
That
yeah.
yeah, that's not a bad take.
Again, I think it's a disappointing but positive outcome is how I'm looking at it.
Yeah. Do you think like this is really speculative and we very well might find out the answer to this in August? What do you think the result of this game would have been if it was played anywhere other than this stadium? You could say neutral site, you could say at Seafoam, but pretty much any other stadium. Same field, basically same style of play.
Like going into this game, like if this game hadn't happened or if there's a rematch at a different place now.
In retrospect, rematch.
Okay, I'd say rematch at home. I'd say we could win that personally. I think the Winchell could win that, especially now. Rematch at a neutral site, I'd give it a toss up. I'd say 50-50. And I said the Winchell would win. It wouldn't be like a blowout. It would be a close one, 2-3.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think if it was a rematch, if you give us back, our 3 defensive stars, I think Minnesota does at home. I think Minnesota does give a 3, 4, 5 point win, maybe.
Hmm.
At a neutral site, I think they win the same way they've beaten Madison and India. They win by 1 and they win by not very clean, not very pretty, but get the job done.
Yeah.
And I think if they have a shot in Colorado again, if they played in Colorado, which they won't play in Colorado again, but if they did, I think they it's a 50-50 then. I think Minnesota knows exactly what happened, what went wrong, what they need to do moving forward.
I will say, having basically never seen Colorado play, I think I've seen 1 or 2 of their games. I really appreciated their defense. As a guy who says defense wins games, and again, I'm not even trying to like argue that point right now. Like just out of pure like admiration for good ultimate, they have a good defense. They didn't let any throw go easy. they tipped hucks, and even if the huck still made it 70 yards, they got fingers on it, like off the throw, pretty much. Like they were so pestering to Minnesota's offense. It was awesome. Like like as an Ultimate fan, it was really cool to see, and like the way they clogged up these middle cutting lanes.
It
I
felt like
really enjoyed it.
watching it felt like watching the Windchills on defense. It really did. Like,
Well, a little bit better, at least last night.
yeah. But Colorado's obviously, I mean, they're a good team. I'm gonna be real. I think their loss against Oakland, especially, is like not indicative of how they are as a team. I really do think they are as good as the Shred. I think the current rankings in the West Division are not reflective of how good Colorado is. I think they caught a couple bad breaks,
Mhm.
but no, I wouldn't be surprised if they made it to championship weekend still.
I
That's my
I
hot take. I think they go to championship weekend still.
I think, and this is my hot take. I think that playoff race in the West, I think Aviators and Oakland both beat out the Summit for it. I
really
think I know
both of them.
I don't. I mean, Colorado might not make it if I'm being honest.
Wow.
Watching those two teams play, it's like Colorado has a blind spot against them. I mean, you didn't watch the Spiders versus Summit game?
No, no.
It, I mean, the
It wasn't a
Summit,
pretty game, but it wasn't a like the
it was
Summit
not a
were
blowout. It was a
completely
one
outclassed.
it was a 1 point win by the Spiders, and I think this is what everyone's been saying about the Spiders all season is they're like how they're clean in the first quarter, and then they are the scrappiest team, and they will get that win. They will fight for that win. They will not let it go. If they can smell it, they're like sharks in the water. They are going for it. You are not getting it past them. And I mean, Oakland. I mean, I think I have Oakland is like second in the West right now. I think the Shred, undeniably the best, maybe better than the Empire. Like they've been playing fantastic. Without some of their stars, they're still doing really well.
All right, someone click that, send it to Jordan Kerr. He just said the Shred are better than the Empire.
They might be. They might be.
I'm not disagreeing with you per se. I think that's a big take though.
Also,
This is a public podcast.
shout out to Jordan Kerr for DMing us on Instagram, on our story on Instagram. He was high key cheering for the Chill last night, which like he should have been because we were playing his divisional rival. But I appreciated that little DM. Um,
Yeah. Did you
Also
guys
for
know
win,
Kerr is
go
a
ahead.
Winchell fan?
Yeah, Jordan Kerr is low key a chill boy.
Kerr,
He's
if you're listening, we
honorary.
gotta get you on the pod sometime, man.
I do want to plug Pocket Square cocktails. So I went to go watch the game with my lovely wife Noelle at Pocket Square Cocktails in New Hope. Those watch parties were pretty fun. That was the only one I've gone to so far this season, and I guess there's only one left because they only have one more away game. But yeah, good vibes, and like there's a good Cam Lacey fan club there. I don't know, assuming friends and family. I guess I didn't know specifics. But yeah, I just want to give them a shout out if anyone is listening and wants to go to that. If they're ever thinking about going, they have one more chance to go this season. I'm gonna try to get there. I don't know if I'm free that day, but um, yeah. So shout out to them. But I
Yeah,
do
I
want to
mean,
bring up,
We are there. Comes ahead of us.
yeah,
yeah,
and I know Jeff and I were there preseason for a sort of and it was great. It was great to watch those games.
I had
Um,
another Scoober. They have a drink called the Scoober, which is like a rum and limeade. Beautiful. It's a great drink, simple and effective.
And a great
um,
throw.
yeah. I will say, talking about New York being better than being worse than Salt Lake being better than New York. They play each other 7:15. Mark your calendars.
That's
So
right.
and they play Colorado the day
And then
before.
Colorado, yeah.
So
That's gonna be the weekend New York loses. I don't know against who. I'm not. I mean, I will make a prediction if you ask me to, but New York isn't going 2-0 on that road trip.
I
We'll
know
do
against
that. We'll do
two.
that next week. We'll have that be a segment.
Jay says Salt Lake. He already said it, so
Yeah, yeah.
No,
he
so
said Shred's taking it back.
we can ask the guest next week. That's
Oh, true, because we'll probably have a guest next week. We don't know who it's going to be yet. If
stay
you're a Winchell
tuned.
player and I've DM'd you on Instagram, please reach it back out to us.
If you're a wind chill player and you haven't been DM'd, but you'd like to be on the pod, DM us.
That's true. That's true. I'm gonna share my screen because we did little preseason predictions of like record and whatnot.
Right. That's right.
And
Oh man, I forgot about this.
See what kind of terrible takes we had back
they've aged relatively well.
Okay.
I hope it's big enough. So Jeff, we'll go down mine first. I said the wind chill were gonna lose at Union. They lost at Union. I said they were gonna lose at Summit. They've lost at Summit. And then this one I'm scared about if I'm right. I don't want to be right. But I said Alley Cats are gonna take that win. And I remember saying I went back to watch that pod, like it's gonna be toward the end of the season. Alley Cats are gonna be strong and it's gonna be a final playoff push. Right now, it's possible. I don't think it's likely, but I still think it's possible. And then they're gonna win against Union and Mechanics. Jay said they'd lose at Union. He was correct. And then that the Radicals would come to Minnesota and beat them, which they almost did. That was going to be a very big win for Jay in terms of the standings. And then he had the rest of the season undefeated. So not quite as accurate, but still that was a very good prediction. And then Kane said that the Union was going to travel. Oh yeah, because Kane had all of the Union Minnesota games, the visiting team win. And so far he's been incorrect on 2 of them.
Hey, 3 for 3.
The home teams have won, but then he said the Summit was going to win, which he was right on. So hopefully he's wrong about this Union one too when they travel to the wind chill, Minnesota in a couple weeks. And then we did definitely do this like fantasy ultimate. We have not kept up with that, but
no, not even a little bit.
The top part is interesting.
How about this? How about this right now? Everyone on your list, pick one player, and whoever has the highest plus minus by the end of the season wins.
Okay. I'll take Quinn Snyder.
It's valid. It's valid.
I'm taking Victor Luo.
Oh.
Give me Max Shepard.
Nice.
I like that.
All right. I'm gonna highlight these really fast so I know.
Yeah.
So we have this. Green.
Look at that.
Yeah, and then KPS didn't age. We did not update these after like. Yeah. But that's that's fun to go back and look at. Yeah. So Minnesota they go to Madison on July 7th, and then on July 9th, so that's Friday, and then that Sunday, they come back home to face the Alley Cats. So those are gonna be 2 very interesting games. Unfortunately, I won't be able to be at the game on Sunday, so
I should be able to go to that.
That's Noel's birthday. That's Noel's birthday, so we'll probably be, going to get dinner or something. But those games are gonna be pretty big, just in terms of standings and morale. Obviously, the Alley Cats one's gonna be like the game they have to win.
Yep. But I'm not doing about it.
They only need to win 2 games. They have 4. They just gotta get
That's true.
500.
I mean, so selfishly speaking, and this is like behind the curtain, if anyone's curious about our personal lives, if they don't get first seeding, we miss playoff game because we have a bachelor party on what is scheduled to be the first, like the playoff game. We have a bachelor party to go to. So if Minnesota has to play on like July 29th, we're not going to be there. Unless we could make that part of the bachelor party.
I totally forgot about that as well, to be honest. I was like,
so totally selfishly, Minnesota has to get first place just so we don't have to miss a game. That's the reason.
Actually, yeah.
So pressure's on for our sake.
Wind chill, all you players who are listening, you have to win. You have to be first.
If you ain't first, then we're not going to be on the fence at your playoff game. So.
Well, unless for a couple of them,
that would be fun to do that. Bring the bachelor party.
It would be.
All
right. I think that's all. We had a pretty extensive agenda. I think we've kind of hit everything. Any other last thoughts on Summit game or upcoming games?
I still love this Wind Chill team. I love how go, 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 let's get this win we are. And like I said during the pod, like I said before, I'll keep saying it. They're coming back from this. This is a loss, but it's not a defeat.
Yep. That's a nice clip.
And that's a nice clip. Yep.
Heck yeah.
I think my kind of closing thoughts about the standings in the Central is I know we were all like, oh man, Central's going to be extremely like mixed up this year, but I don't think any of us had Madison at 1-6, and I don't think any of us had Minnesota getting this close to the Alley Cats. The Alley Cats being this close, being this tight of a race, for top three. Like I mean, as of right now, anybody can get first, but again, Minnesota just needs 2 more wins to guarantee their spot.
Mhm.
So that's what we're hoping for.
Heck yeah. And PK comes back on, he said July 10th. So the day, of course, after the Alley Cats game. But after that, so he'll have the Union and Mechanics and playoffs. So I'm looking forward to his return as well.
Mhm.
But again, want to continue to appreciate all of the fans listening. We know in our hearts that you are truly Wind Chill fans trying to get more Wind Chill content. You're not necessarily Wind Chill Talk fans, but we still love seeing all those numbers rise. We keep getting a lot of interaction on social media, a lot of listens and views on Spotify and YouTube. So definitely just want to shout out you guys. This episode is presented by the R1P1 Network. They are doing some great work in the digital media sports agency world. Love the thumbnails and artwork they're doing for our podcast. So thank you to them. And we will see you hopefully at Pocket Square Cocktails on July 7th for the Wind Chill at Madison game. And then that Sunday at Seafoam Stadium for the Alley Cats game. So show up big, get loud, and in the meantime, stay chilly.